I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the email subject line. Emergency HOA meeting mandatory attendance required. Living in Willow Creek Estates in Henderson, Nevada, for the past 7 years, I had attended my fair share of homeowners association meetings, but never one marked as mandatory with such urgency. My wife Sarah looked over my shoulder as I opened the message on my phone during breakfast. "What do they want now?" she asked, spreading jam on her toast. Our 2 kids, Emma and Jack, were already at the table fighting over the last waffle. I scanned the email quickly. Special assessment vote. They are calling for each household to pay an additional $3,000. My stomach dropped. $3,000 we did not have sitting around, not with Emma starting college in the fall and our HVAC system making ominous grinding sounds every time it kicked on. Sarah's face went pale. $3,000? For what? The email did not specify. It just said the reserve fund had been depleted due to unforeseen circumstances and emergency repairs were needed throughout the community. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at 7 in the community center. Attendance was not technically mandatory under Nevada law, but the email made it clear that the vote would proceed regardless of how many homeowners showed up. I forwarded the email to my neighbor Dave, who lived 3 houses down. Dave was a retired accountant, the kind of guy who actually read through HOA financial statements and asked uncomfortable questions at meetings. If anyone could make sense of this, it was him. His response came within minutes. "Already looking into it. Something stinks. Meet me at my place tonight at 6. That evening, I walked down Sagebrush Lane to Dave's house, a well-maintained 2-story with desert landscaping that perfectly matched HOA requirements. Dave answered the door before I could knock, his reading glasses perched on his nose and a thick stack of papers in his hand. Come in," he said, leading me to his dining room table, which was covered in spreadsheets and financial documents. "You are not going to believe this." Dave's wife, Patricia, brought us coffee and then quietly excused herself. I could tell from her expression that she already knew whatever Dave was about to tell me. "So I pulled up our HOA financial records," Dave began, spreading several pages across the table. "Every homeowner has access to these through the management company portal, but nobody ever looks at them. I have been tracking our reserve fund for years because that is just what I do. Last year, we had $473,000 in reserves." I nodded. "Our community had 126 homes, and we each paid $215 per month in HOA fees. A portion of that went to reserves for major repairs and replacements like roads, the community pool, landscaping equipment, that sort of thing. According to the latest financial statement from last month," Dave continued, tapping a highlighted section, "our reserve fund now sits at $18,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. "How is that possible? Where did $450,000 go?" Dave handed me another document. "This is where it gets interesting. Starting last April, there were a series of large withdrawals. $50,000 in April, $75,000 in May, another $100,000 in June, smaller amounts throughout the summer and fall. The descriptions are all vague: landscape improvements, pool maintenance, community enhancement projects. But here is the thing: I drive through this community every single day. What improvements? What enhancements?" He had a point. Our community looked exactly the same as it had a year ago, maybe slightly worse, actually. The roses in the median near the entrance had not been trimmed in months, and several streetlights were still out from a windstorm back in January. "Did you check with the management company?" I asked. "I called them this afternoon. Got transferred 3 times before reaching someone who told me all questions need to be directed to the HOA board, so I called Regina Morrison directly." "Regina Morrison? our HOA president for the past 3 years. A 52-year-old woman with short blonde hair, always impeccably dressed, and the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She had run unopposed in the last election because nobody else wanted the job. Most people saw HOA board positions as thankless volunteer work. Apparently, Regina saw it differently. What did she say? Dave's expression darkened. She told me that reserve fund expenditures were approved by the board and that all information would be presented at the Thursday meeting. When I pressed her on specifics, she said it was not appropriate to discuss financial matters over the phone and hung up on me. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. So basically, she is stonewalling you. Completely. But here is what really caught my attention. Dave pulled out another document, this one with several addresses highlighted. I started cross-referencing board member addresses with county property records. Regina Morrison lives at 847 Desert Vista Court. That is the house on the corner with the big lot that backs up to the desert preserve. I knew the house. It was one of the larger properties in our development, probably close to 4,000 square feet with a prime location. 6 months ago, Dave continued, the county issued permits for a major residential construction project at that address. Pool installation, outdoor kitchen, extensive hardscaping, the works. The permit value listed is $385,000. The implication hit me like a truck. You think she used HOA money to build her pool? I think it is one hell of a coincidence, Dave said carefully. But I need to be sure before I make any accusations. That is where I need your help. You work in construction, right? I nodded. I was a project manager for a mid-size commercial construction company. I knew contractors, suppliers, and how to spot inflated invoices or phony billing. I need someone who can verify what kind of work was actually done at her property, Dave said. Can you take a look? Maybe from the street, just to see what we are dealing with. The next morning, I drove to Regina's house on my way to work. Desert Vista Court was in the newer section of Willow Creek Estates, where the lots were larger and the houses more expensive. I slowed down as I approached number 847, trying not to be obvious about it. Even from the street, I could see the transformation. The backyard, visible over the block wall thanks to the property's elevation, now featured a massive pool with a swim-up bar, a full outdoor kitchen with what looked like high-end stainless appliances, a covered pavilion with ceiling fans, and extensive stone pavers covering what must have been at least 1,000 square feet. There was a fire pit, built-in barbecue, and what appeared to be a hot tub separate from the main pool. This was not a simple pool installation. This was a resort-grade outdoor living space, the kind of project that absolutely could cost $300,000 to $400,000 in the current market. I took a few photos from the street with my phone, trying to be discreet, then drove on before anyone noticed. At the next stop sign, I texted the photos to Dave with a single message. We need to talk to the other homeowners. That afternoon, Dave and I started making calls. We reached out to neighbors we trusted, people who had lived in Willow Creek Estates for years and actually cared about the community. By Wednesday evening, we had a group of 15 homeowners who agreed to meet at Dave's house to discuss our findings before the official HOA meeting. The gathering at Dave's place that Wednesday night felt like a war council. People crowded into his living room, sitting on couches, chairs, and even the floor. I recognized most of them. Tom and Jennifer Chen from Cactus Bloom Drive, Michael Rodriguez, who lived next to the community park, the Hendersons from my street, and several others. Dave presented his findings methodically, walking everyone through the financial statements, the timeline of withdrawals, and the permit information he had uncovered. When he showed the photos I had taken of Regina's property, the room erupted. "That is our money," Jennifer Chen said, her voice shaking with anger. We have been paying into that reserve fund for years. My roof is leaking, Michael Rodriguez added. I asked the HOA about when they plan to do the community roof replacements, since we are coming up on 20 years, and that was supposed to be funded by reserves. They told me there was not enough money in the budget. Now I know why. Tom Chen, who was an attorney, looked carefully at Dave's documents. This is embezzlement if what you are suggesting is true. But we need proof that HOA funds were actually used for her personal property. Right now, all we have is suspicious timing. He was right. We had circumstantial evidence, but nothing concrete that would hold up in court or even justify calling the police. The management company has to have invoices, I said. Every withdrawal from the reserve fund should have supporting documentation. Contracts, invoices, receipts, we need to see those. Regina controls access to that information through the board, Dave pointed out, and she is clearly not going to hand it over willingly. Then we force her hand at tomorrow's meeting, Tom said. Under Nevada HOA law, specifically NRS 116, homeowners have the right to inspect association records, including financial documents and supporting invoices. If she refuses, we can take legal action to compel disclosure. We spent the next hour planning our approach for the Thursday meeting. Tom would take the lead on the legal arguments, Dave would present the financial analysis, and I would speak to the construction costs and timeline. Others agreed to film the meeting on their phones and take notes. We knew Regina would not go down without a fight. Thursday evening arrived with unseasonable heat, even for Nevada in March. The community center was already packed when I arrived 15 minutes before the meeting start time. Sarah came with me, as did Dave and Patricia. Nearly every seat was filled, which was unprecedented. Usually, HOA meetings drew maybe a dozen people at most. Regina Morrison stood at the front of the room near a folding table with 3 other board members. Carol Jenkins, the vice president, a timid woman in her 60s who rarely spoke. Howard Peck, the treasurer, a retired engineer who seemed perpetually confused, and Stephanie Walsh, the secretary, who was relatively new to the board. Regina looked confident, almost smug, as she surveyed the crowded room. She wore a crisp white blazer over a coral blouse, her hair perfectly styled. She checked her watch precisely at 7 and called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming this evening," she began, her voice carrying that practiced cheerfulness that always set my teeth on edge. "I know the special assessment announcement came as a surprise to many of you, but I assure you this is necessary to maintain our community standards." She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation on a portable screen, showing generic photos of deteriorating infrastructure, aging pool equipment, and roads in need of repair. None of the photos were actually from our community, I noticed. They were stock images. "As you can see, our infrastructure has reached a critical point," Regina continued. "We need approximately $375,000 to address these issues. With 126 homes in our community, that works out to just under $3,000 per household." Hands shot up around the room, but Regina ignored them, continuing with her presentation. She outlined a payment plan option and mentioned that failure to pay the assessment could result in liens against properties. When she finally paused, Tom Chen stood up without waiting to be recognized. "I have several questions about the reserve fund expenditures over the past year." Regina's smile tightened. "This meeting is about the special assessment vote, not a general question and answer session." "Actually," Tom replied calmly, "Nevada law requires that before voting on a special assessment, homeowners must be provided with detailed financial information justifying the need. We are entitled to understand why our reserve fund was depleted." The room murmured in agreement. Regina's jaw clenched, but she maintained her composure. The reserve fund was used for approved community improvements and maintenance as authorized by the board. Can you specify what improvements? Dave called out from his seat. Because I have reviewed our financial statements, and I cannot identify any major projects that would account for $455,000 in expenditures over 10 months. The murmuring grew louder. Clearly, many homeowners had not realized how much money was involved. The board approved numerous projects, Regina said, her voice developing an edge. Landscape enhancements, pool upgrades, irrigation system repairs. It is all documented in our records. Then you would not mind providing us with copies of the invoices and contracts for those projects, Tom said. As homeowners, we have the legal right to inspect all association records under NRS 116.31175. I am formally requesting access to all financial documents related to reserve fund expenditures from April through December of last year. Regina's composure cracked slightly. Those documents are available through the proper channels. You need to submit a written request to the management company. I did, Dave interjected, 2 days ago. They told me to direct all inquiries to you, so here I am at an official HOA meeting with dozens of witnesses making a formal request. Provide the documentation. The room broke into applause. Regina looked to Howard Peck, the treasurer, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat and avoided eye contact. I will make sure those documents are made available, Regina said through gritted teeth. But right now, we need to vote on the special assessment. All in favor. Point of order, Tom interrupted. We cannot hold a valid vote on a special assessment without proper financial disclosure. If you proceed with this vote without providing the requested documentation, any assessment approved will be subject to legal challenge. I second that, called out Jennifer Chen. I want to see exactly where my reserve fund money went before I agree to pay another $3,000. The room erupted in agreement. People were standing now, voices overlapping as they demanded answers. Regina tried to call for order, but the meeting had devolved into chaos. Finally, after several minutes of shouting, Regina held up her hands. Fine. The vote will be postponed until next week. In the meantime, the board will compile the requested financial documentation. This meeting is adjourned. She gathered her materials quickly and headed for the door, ignoring the crowd of homeowners trying to ask questions. Carol and Stephanie followed her like frightened ducklings, but Howard Peck remained at the table, looking miserable. I made my way through the crowd to Howard. Hey, can I talk to you for a minute? He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I suppose you want to yell at me too? No, I said, sitting down beside him. I just want to understand what happened. You are the treasurer. You must have seen where the money was going. Howard was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, Regina told me the expenditures were all approved community projects. She had invoices, contracts, everything looked legitimate. I just signed the checks like I was supposed to. Did you ever verify that the work was actually done? He shook his head slowly. That was not my job. I just managed the accounts. Regina handled the vendors and contractors. He looked at me with something like desperation. I retired from engineering 3 years ago. My wife convinced me to join the board to stay active, meet people. I never wanted to deal with any of this. Howard, I said carefully, I need you to be honest with me. Did any of that work actually happen? The landscape enhancements, the pool upgrades, any of it? His silence was answer enough. How much did you know? I pressed. I started having suspicions around September, he admitted quietly. Some of the invoices seemed high, and I could not see any evidence of work being done. I mentioned it to Regina, and she told me that contractors had been paid but some projects were delayed. She said everything would be completed by winter. When it was not, I asked again. She told me that if I kept questioning her authority, she would have me removed from the board for insubordination. That is not how HOA boards work, I said. She cannot just remove you for asking questions. I know that now, Howard said. But I am 73 years old and I just wanted to avoid conflict. I should have spoken up. I should have done something. His voice cracked. I let her steal from everyone. Over the next few days, the community buzzed with speculation and anger. Dave created a private Facebook group for Willow Creek Estates homeowners that grew to 80 members within 24 hours. People shared their frustrations, their own suspicions, and their determination to get answers. Regina remained silent, not responding to emails or phone calls. The management company, Desert Oasis HOA Management, issued a brief statement saying they were cooperating with the board to compile requested documents. On Monday morning, Tom Chen called me. I just heard from the management company. They are sending over financial documents this afternoon. Can you meet at my office at 4 to review them? I took a late lunch and met Tom, Dave, and Michael Rodriguez at Tom's law office in downtown Henderson. A paralegal brought in 3 bankers' boxes full of papers and dropped them on the conference room table. This is everything they sent, Tom said, already pulling files from the first box. Let us start going through it systematically. We divided up the documents and started reviewing. What we found was simultaneously damning and sloppy. Regina had not even tried to hide her tracks particularly well, probably because she never expected anyone to actually look. The first major red flag was an invoice from Sunset Landscape Solutions for $75,000, dated May 15th. The description was vague: community landscape enhancement and irrigation upgrades. But when Dave searched for Sunset Landscape Solutions, he found no business license, no website, no online presence at all. This company does not exist, Dave said. At least not as a legitimate registered business in Nevada. We found more. An invoice from Premier Pool Services for $110,000 for pool equipment replacement and renovation. Another non-existent company. An invoice from Desert Hardscape Design for $95,000. Another ghost business. But here is where Regina had gotten careless. Several of the fake invoices included a payment address, a P.O. box in Henderson. Tom's paralegal did some digging and discovered that the P.O. box was registered to R. Morrison. She was invoicing herself, I said, unable to believe the audacity. She created fake companies and wrote checks to herself. Not all of them, Dave said, holding up another invoice. This one is real. It was from Anderson Custom Pools, a legitimate company I actually knew. They had done several high-end residential projects around Las Vegas. The invoice was for $325,000 for a complete outdoor living space installation, including pool, spa, outdoor kitchen, pavilion, and hardscaping. The address listed for the project, 847 Desert Vista Court, Regina Morrison's home. There it is, Tom said quietly. Direct proof that she used HOA money for her personal property. We photographed every document, organized everything chronologically, and created a detailed timeline of the fraud. Over 10 months, Regina had stolen approximately $438,000 from the Willow Creek Estates Reserve Fund. Some of it went to her pool project. The rest appeared to have gone into fake business accounts that ultimately fed back to her. This is beyond civil litigation, Tom said. This is criminal embezzlement, theft, and fraud. We need to go to the police. That evening, our group met again at Dave's house to discuss next steps. We now had 15 core homeowners actively involved in the investigation, plus dozens more following along in the Facebook group. Before we go to the police, we should confront her, Jennifer Chen suggested. Give her a chance to explain or resign. No, Tom said firmly. If we tip her off that we have this evidence, she might destroy documents or try to flee. We need to report this to law enforcement immediately and let them handle it. What about the HOA meeting next week? I asked. She is supposed to provide financial documentation then. Let her, Tom said. Let her stand up in front of everyone and either lie or refuse to provide documents. It will only strengthen the case against her. In the meantime, I am taking everything we found to the Henderson Police Department tomorrow morning. On Tuesday, Tom and Dave met with Detective Karen Williams at the Henderson Police Department's White-Collar Crimes Division. They brought copies of all the financial documents, the timeline we had created, and the photos of Regina's property. Detective Williams was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had handled numerous fraud cases in the Las Vegas area. According to Tom, she reviewed their evidence carefully and asked pointed questions about the HOA structure, financial controls, and how they had obtained the documents. This looks solid, she told them. I will need to verify some things and get formal statements from board members, but based on what you have shown me, there is definitely probable cause for an investigation. Do not confront the suspect or discuss this with anyone outside your core group yet. I do not want her to know we are looking into this until we are ready to move. The next few days were torture. I had to act normal, go to work, take care of my family, all while knowing that a criminal investigation was underway. Sarah knew something was going on, but I could not give her details yet, per Detective Williams' instructions. The Thursday HOA meeting arrived. This time, even more people showed up. The community center was standing room only, with at least 90 homeowners packed inside. Detective Williams had asked Tom to go ahead with the meeting as planned, to give Regina one more chance to either come clean or dig herself deeper. Regina arrived exactly at 7, looking less polished than usual. Her blazer was wrinkled and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup could not quite hide. She knew something was wrong. She called the meeting to order with noticeably less confidence than the previous week. As promised, we have compiled financial documentation for your review. The management company has prepared packets that will be made available after tonight's meeting. We want to see them now, someone called out. The packets are still being finalized, Regina said, a slight tremor in her voice. They will be distributed by email tomorrow. Tom stood up. That is not acceptable. We have been waiting a week for this information. You have had plenty of time to prepare documentation. Regina's face flushed. I do not appreciate your tone, Mr. Chen. The board has worked very hard to respond to your requests. Then provide the documents, Dave said, also standing. Show us the invoices for the $455,000 in reserve fund expenditures. Show us the contracts. Show us proof that the work was actually done in our community. The room went dead silent. Regina looked around at all the faces staring at her, waiting for an answer. For a moment, I thought she might actually confess, might break down and admit what she had done. Instead, she went on the attack. I do not have to justify board decisions to you or anyone else. The board has authority to manage association funds as we see fit. If you do not like it, you can run for the board yourselves next election. You stole from us, Jennifer Chen shouted. You built a pool at your house with our money. The room erupted. People were on their feet, shouting questions and accusations. Regina tried to maintain control, but it was useless. She looked desperately at Carol and Stephanie, but both women sat frozen, clearly wanting no part of this. Finally, Regina grabbed her bag and headed for the door. This meeting is adjourned. If you have complaints, submit them in writing to the management company. She pushed through the crowd and disappeared into the parking lot. The meeting dissolved into chaos, with people forming small groups to discuss what to do next. Tom caught my eye and gave a small nod. It was time. The next morning, Detective Williams arrived at Regina Morrison's house with 2 uniformed officers and a warrant. I was not there, but Dave's house had a view of Desert Vista Court, and he watched the whole thing unfold. They were inside for over 2 hours, emerging with several boxes of documents and what appeared to be computer equipment. Regina was not arrested at that point, but according to Dave, she looked shaken as she stood on her front lawn watching police load evidence into their vehicles. By that afternoon, everyone in Willow Creek Estates knew the police were investigating the HOA president. The Facebook group exploded with activity. Some people were thrilled, others worried about what this meant for the community. A few actually defended Regina, suggesting this was all a misunderstanding or a vendetta by troublemaking homeowners. Detective Williams called Tom that evening with an update. We executed the search warrant and seized financial records, computers, and correspondence. Based on preliminary review, your evidence checks out. We found bank statements showing deposits matching the amounts on the fraudulent invoices. She was not very sophisticated about hiding it. What happens next? Tom asked. We will build the full case, interview witnesses, and work with the district attorney's office. This will take some time, probably a few months. In the meantime, I would recommend that your HOA board take steps to remove her and secure your association accounts. That weekend, Tom drafted a petition to call an emergency homeowner meeting to vote on removing Regina Morrison from the board. Under Nevada HOA law, homeowners could remove board members with a majority vote. We needed 64 signatures to reach the required threshold. We had 97 signatures within 3 days. The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. This time, the community center could not hold everyone, so we moved the meeting to the larger recreation center at Heritage Park. The turnout was unprecedented. 108 of 126 homeowners, either in person or by proxy. Regina did not attend. Neither did Carol Jenkins, who resigned from the board the day before via email. Stephanie Walsh showed up, looking terrified, and immediately announced she was also resigning effective immediately. Howard Peck sat at the front table alone. He stood up slowly when Tom called the meeting to order. Before we proceed with any votes, Howard said, his voice shaking, I want to say something. I was the treasurer. It was my responsibility to oversee our finances, and I failed. I trusted Regina when I should have asked more questions. I saw red flags and I did not act on them. I am sorry. I am deeply, truly sorry for letting you all down. He paused, wiping his eyes. I have already spoken with the police and given them everything I know. I am also resigning from the board, effective immediately. I hope you all can forgive me someday, but I will understand if you cannot. The room was quiet as Howard gathered his papers and walked out, his shoulders slumped. I felt a mix of anger and sympathy. He had been negligent, certainly, but he was not malicious like Regina. He was just a tired old man who had been manipulated. With no board members remaining, we had to start from scratch. Tom agreed to serve as interim president, Dave as treasurer, and Jennifer Chen as secretary. Michael Rodriguez volunteered as vice president. The vote was unanimous. Their first order of business was changing all bank account access, revoking Regina's authority, and conducting a complete financial audit. They hired a forensic accountant to review everything and determine the exact amount stolen. The forensic accountant's report came back 6 weeks later. The total theft was $443,782. Every penny of it could be traced to Regina Morrison, either through fake companies or direct payments to vendors for work at her personal property. The criminal investigation continued through spring and into summer. Detective Williams and her team built an airtight case, documenting every fraudulent invoice, every unauthorized transfer, every lie Regina had told to cover her tracks. In late July, Regina Morrison was arrested at her home and charged with 9 felony counts: theft, embezzlement, fraudulent schemes, forgery, and money laundering. The charges carried a potential prison sentence of 15 to 30 years. The local news picked up the story. HOA president charged with embezzling $440,000 for personal pool, ran the headline in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Regina's photo was plastered across the TV news and online. Our quiet little community was suddenly the subject of public scrutiny. Regina's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the Clark County District Attorney's Office was not interested in being lenient. White-collar crime was taken seriously in Nevada, especially when it involved stealing from middle-class families. The case went to trial in November. Tom, Dave, Howard, and I all testified, as did representatives from Anderson Custom Pools and several financial experts. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically, showing exactly how Regina had created fake companies, forged invoices, and funneled HOA money into her personal accounts and property. Regina's defense was weak. Her attorney argued that she had genuinely believed she was acting within her authority as HOA president, that the payments were for community benefit, and that any errors were the result of poor record-keeping rather than criminal intent. The jury did not buy it. After just 4 hours of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on all 9 counts. At sentencing in January, the judge was harsh. "You held a position of trust within your community," Judge Patricia Martinez said, looking down at Regina from the bench. "Your neighbors elected you to manage their association and protect their investments. Instead, you stole from them systematically and shamelessly. You used their money to build luxury amenities at your home while they struggled to pay bills and save for their children's education. This was not a mistake or poor judgment. This was calculated theft." Regina was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving at least 8 years. She was also ordered to pay full restitution of $443,782, plus interest and court costs. Her attorney immediately filed an appeal, but legal experts Tom consulted said it was unlikely to succeed. The evidence had been overwhelming, and the trial had been conducted properly. The restitution was another matter entirely. Regina's assets were seized, including her home. The property went into foreclosure and was eventually sold at auction for $620,000. After paying off her mortgage and various liens, there was about $280,000 remaining. That money went back to the Willow Creek Estates Reserve Fund. We were still short approximately $160,000, but it was better than nothing. The new HOA board, under Tom's leadership, made recovering the remaining funds a priority. They sued Regina's insurance company, arguing that the HOA's directors and officers' liability insurance should cover the theft. After 8 months of legal wrangling, the insurance company settled for $150,000. Combined with the money from Regina's house sale, we had recovered almost all of the stolen funds. The special assessment Regina had tried to force through was canceled. Instead, the board implemented modest fee increases over 3 years to rebuild the reserves properly. Most homeowners were relieved to pay an extra $30 per month instead of $3,000 all at once. The community itself went through a transformation. The scandal had forced people to pay attention, to get involved, to care about how their HOA was run. Board meetings that used to draw a handful of residents now regularly had 30 or 40 attendees. People actually read the financial statements. They asked questions. They held their elected representatives accountable. We also implemented new safeguards. The board voted to require dual signatures on any check over $5,000. All reserve fund expenditures over $10,000 required homeowner approval at a general meeting. Financial statements were posted publicly every month. An independent audit was conducted annually by a firm hired directly by the homeowners, not the board. Dave joked that Regina had accidentally done us a favor by being such an obvious crook. If she had been smarter about it, taken smaller amounts over a longer period, we might never have noticed, he said one evening as we sat in his backyard, watching the sun set over the desert. Instead, she got greedy and sloppy, and now we have the most transparent and accountable HOA in Nevada. He was probably right. Our community had been sleepwalking through years of apathy, assuming that someone else was handling things, that the system was working. Regina's theft had been a brutal wake-up call, but we had emerged stronger and more united. Sarah and I still live at Willow Creek Estates. Emma is in her second year at UNLV now, studying business administration. She says she wants to work in forensic accounting after graduation, inspired by watching the investigation unfold. Jack just started high school and plays on the community basketball court that we finally got properly resurfaced, using reserve funds. I see Howard Peck occasionally at community events. He is quieter now, more withdrawn, but he still lives in the neighborhood. He donated $10,000 to the reserve fund after Regina's trial, money he did not legally owe but said he needed to give for his own peace of mind. Some people have forgiven him. Others have not. I fall somewhere in between. Tom Chen served as HOA president for 2 years before stepping down, exhausted from the experience but proud of what we had accomplished. Jennifer Chen took over after him and has been doing an excellent job. The board is now elected annually instead of serving 3-year terms, giving homeowners more frequent opportunities to make changes if they are unhappy. As for Regina Morrison, she is currently incarcerated at Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center in North Las Vegas. I do not think about her often, but when I do, I mostly feel a sense of waste. She had thrown away her freedom, her reputation, and her future for a fancy pool and outdoor kitchen that she barely got to enjoy before it was all taken away. The last time I drove past her old house, now owned by a young family with 3 kids, I noticed they had filled in the swim-up bar section of the pool and converted the outdoor kitchen into a more practical barbecue area. The resort-style luxury that Regina had stolen to create had been transformed into a functional family space. There was something poetic about that. On Tuesday evenings, I still attend HOA meetings, though they are much less dramatic than they used to be. We discuss mundane things like landscaping contracts and pool maintenance schedules. We review financial statements and vote on minor repairs. It is boring, exactly as it should be. After one particularly tedious meeting about whether to replace the community center carpet, Dave and I walked back to our cars together. Remember when HOA meetings involved exposing massive criminal conspiracies? He said with a grin. I do not miss those days, I replied honestly. Boring is good. Boring means nobody is stealing from us. True, Dave agreed. But you have to admit it was kind of exciting while it lasted, I laughed despite myself. You have a strange definition of exciting. I prefer my life with less fraud and more functioning air conditioning. We said goodnight, and I drove home through the quiet streets of Willow Creek Estates. The streetlights were all working now. The landscaping was well maintained. The community pool, with its legitimately replaced equipment, sparkled under the lights. Everything looked exactly as it should have looked all along. Sarah was waiting when I got home, watching television in the living room. How was the meeting? She asked. Incredibly boring, I said, kissing her forehead. They are replacing the carpet in the community center. We voted on 3 different color options. Which color won? Beige, she laughed. How thrilling. That is exactly what I said to Dave. I settled onto the couch next to her, grateful for the ordinary evening, the mundane problems, the simple peace of a well-run community where nobody was committing felonies. We had been through something extraordinary, something that had tested our community and brought us together in unexpected ways. But now, sitting in my living room with my wife, discussing carpet colors and weekend plans, I realized this was what I had fought for. Not excitement or drama, but the boring, beautiful normalcy of a home in a community where people looked out for each other and held each other accountable. The special assessment letter that had started everything sat in a file folder in my office, along with all the other documents from that turbulent year. I kept them as a reminder, not of Regina's betrayal, but of what ordinary people could accomplish when they paid attention, asked questions, and refused to accept easy lies. Sometimes Sarah asked if I regretted getting involved, if I wished I had just kept my head down and minded my own business like most people did. The investigation had taken hundreds of hours of my time, the stress had kept me awake many nights, the trial had been emotionally exhausting. But no, I did not regret it. When I saw kids playing at the community park, or neighbors chatting at the pool, or new families moving into our development because they had heard it was well managed and safe, I knew we had done the right thing. Regina Morrison had tried to steal more than just money. She had tried to steal our trust, our sense of community, our belief that people in positions of authority would do the right thing. She had failed. We had taken it all back, along with most of the money she stole. The HOA scandal was now part of Willow Creek Estate's history, a story that new residents learned about from their neighbors, usually told over backyard barbecues or at community events. It served as a cautionary tale and a source of pride. Yes, someone had taken advantage of us, but we had fought back, held her accountable, and made sure it could never happen again. That felt like victory enough. On weekends, I sometimes sat on my front porch in the early morning, coffee in hand, watching the neighborhood wake up. Kids riding bikes, people walking dogs. Joggers making their morning rounds. The ordinary rhythms of suburban life that looked so simple, but required constant maintenance, attention, and care. Dave usually came by on Saturday mornings, and we would sit together in comfortable silence. 2 men who had accidentally become community activists and forensic investigators because someone had needed to step up. "Think we will ever have another crisis like that?" he asked one morning. "God, I hope not," I said. "Once in a lifetime is enough." Agreed, though I have to say it felt good to make a difference. To actually fix something instead of just complaining about it. That was the truth of it, really. We had all spent years complaining about various things. The HOA fees, the rules, the board's decisions, but we had not engaged with the actual governance of our community. We had been passive participants in our own lives, assuming someone else would handle the important stuff. Regina's theft had forced us to recognize that there was no someone else. We were the community. We were the ones responsible for holding our leaders accountable, for asking hard questions, for doing the unglamorous work of reading financial statements and showing up to meetings. It was a lesson that extended far beyond HOA politics. In every aspect of life, democracy, work, family, community, things only worked when people paid attention and participated actively. Apathy was a luxury that eventually came due with interest. 3 years after Regina's arrest, our community held a celebration for the full replenishment of our reserve fund. The board organized a community barbecue at the park with bounce houses for kids and a live band playing classic rock covers. Nearly everyone attended. Tom gave a short speech, thanking everyone who had been involved in the investigation and recovery effort. He did not mention Regina by name, but everyone knew what he was referring to when he talked about our community's resilience in the face of adversity. As the sun set and the band played on, I looked around at the faces of my neighbors. We had been through something together, something that had tested us and ultimately made us stronger. We were not just people who happened to live near each other anymore. We were a genuine community, bonded by shared experience and mutual trust. Emma and Jack played volleyball with neighborhood kids, while Sarah helped serve food with some other parents. Dave was arguing good-naturedly with Michael Rodriguez about sports, their voices carrying across the lawn. Jennifer Chen was organizing a cleanup crew with typical efficiency. Howard Peck stood at the edge of the gathering, talking quietly with a few neighbors who had forgiven him. This was what we had fought for. This was what we had saved. As darkness fell and families started packing up to head home, I felt profound gratitude for the chance to have been part of something meaningful. Not everyone got that opportunity. Not every community came together the way ours had. We had been lucky in our own strange way. Walking home with Sarah and the kids, our path lit by those properly functioning streetlights, I thought about Regina sitting in her prison cell in North Las Vegas. I wondered if she understood what she had lost, not just her freedom but the chance to be part of something real, something valuable. She had chosen a pool over community, luxury over trust, immediate gratification over lasting relationships. In the end, she had gotten neither the pool nor the community. She had nothing but years of incarceration ahead of her and a criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, we had everything. We had homes we could afford, maintained by an honestly managed reserve fund. We had neighbors we trusted. We had learned hard lessons about vigilance and accountability. We had proven that ordinary people could stand up to corruption and win. The monthly HOA fee bill still arrived on the first of every month. $245 now, slightly higher than before but reasonable for what we received. Every time I paid it, I checked the financial statements posted online, verified that our reserve fund was growing appropriately, confirmed that expenditures matched actual work being done in the community. I would never take it for granted again. None of us would. That was Regina Morrison's true legacy. Not the fraud she committed, but the awareness she sparked, the engagement she inadvertently inspired, the community she accidentally strengthened by trying to tear it down. Years from now, when Emma and Jack had homes of their own, I would tell them this story. I would explain that being a good neighbor, a good citizen, meant more than just being friendly and mowing your lawn. It meant paying attention. It meant asking questions when things did not make sense. It meant standing up when you saw something wrong, even when it was uncomfortable or risky. It meant caring enough to get involved. That was the real lesson of the Willow Creek Estates HOA scandal. Not that people would steal if given the opportunity, though that was certainly true. But that communities could fight back when they worked together, when they refused to accept easy lies, when they demanded accountability and transparency. We had reclaimed our reserve fund. More importantly, we had reclaimed our community, and that was worth far more than $443,000. As I locked my front door that night and turned off the porch light, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new boring HOA meetings to attend. But we would face them together, as a community that had learned the hard way what mattered and what did not. The pool at 847 Desert Vista Court still existed, now enjoyed by a family who had nothing to do with the scandal that had funded its construction. Sometimes I saw the kids playing in it as I drove by, splashing and laughing without any knowledge of the fraud and investigation and trial that had swirled around their home before they moved in. That was how it should be. The next generation should get to enjoy the community we had fought to preserve without carrying the burden of our struggles. They would face their own challenges soon enough. For now, though, Willow Creek Estates was at peace. The streetlights worked, the pool was maintained, the landscaping looked beautiful, and the reserve fund was healthy. Regina Morrison was behind bars where she belonged, and the rest of us were free to live our lives in a community we could trust. It had taken a lot of work, a lot of stress, and a lot of uncomfortable conversations. But in the end, justice had been served, funds had been recovered, and safeguards had been put in place to prevent future fraud. We had won. And that made all the boring HOA meetings, all the hours reviewing financial statements, all the difficult confrontations worth it. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, grateful for the community I called home and the neighbors who had stood with me when it mattered most. We had faced a crisis together and emerged stronger. We had proven that ordinary people could make a difference when they cared enough to try. And that was the best thing any community could hope for.